Ah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, hi, nice to meet you. Is this Bill?
Yes, Bill, Amy, and our daughter Sydney.
Okay, great. Welcome all to Paris
Thank you.
Ah, Sydney, say
on this
bonjour. Say
sunny
it.
sunny evening. Where are you joining from?
We're in Central Florida.
Oh wow, okay. So it must be very hot, I guess,
Yes.
Yes,
in
like
the middle of the summer in Florida.
yeah, like 95 degrees. So
Well, we're almost there in Paris. It's been a glorious day, beautiful weather, sun is shining. So it's the perfect time for a stroll through the
nice.
Perfect.
city.
Awesome.
Sounds
Have you
good.
been to Paris before?
A long time ago.
Oh yeah? Okay.
And we want to
And
come back someday.
you're planning to come back? Okay, excellent. So today what I want to do is that I want to take you through some of the most beautiful monuments in Paris. I picked three.
Okay.
So the Louvre, the Palais Royal, and the Opera House.
All
And so
right.
I'm starting these two right here on the Arts Bridge. So first of all, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Julian. I'm Parisian. I was born and raised here. I've been an official guide for 6 years now. And usually, in normal times, I take people to the Louvre, to Versailles, to Orsay, to different museums across the city, different historic monuments, and I give guided tours there.
Okay.
And for now, we're going to do the same thing, except that you're going to enjoy the tour from the comfort of your home. It's a live stream tour
Okay.
online. So we're going to do basically the same, except I won't be stepping into the Louvre. I will walk around the Louvre, the outside, and I will walk in the streets of Paris and try to show you. Oh, sorry, I will turn the camera back onto the city because the star is the city, obviously.
Oh wow.
I can show you the bridge here, the beautiful bridge that connects the Institute of France. There's the Ile de la Cité right there. That's where Notre Dame Cathedral stands.
That's right.
With the oldest bridge in Paris, the new bridge. And and yeah, and the Arts Bridge really is a beautiful spot to take pictures while you're in Paris with the Seine, the river
Look,
that flows through Paris.
see ya. How pretty.
So it's sunny now,
Oh, I see the
and
Eiffel Tower in the background there. We saw the Eiffel Tower. Maybe is that?
the Eiffel Tower in the back, right
There
there.
it is.
Absolutely, yeah, right behind the Orsay Museum.
See ya.
The left bank across river. So I won't be walking through the left bank today. I'll be walking through the right bank. We divide the city into left bank, southern part of the city, south of the river, and north. The right bank, north of the river, northern part of the city. And so I'll be taking you to the Louvre because I want to show you one of the oldest museums in the world, one of the largest buildings in Paris. It's an old institution. It used to be a palace. So I've got pictures to share here. I want to show you a drawing. We call it an illumination. These are beautiful drawings that you find in manuscript books from the Middle Ages. So we still have this book in a library north of Paris. And it's a great source of documentation for Paris in the Middle Ages. And so the Louvre looked like a medieval fortress. When it was built in the 1200s, it was built to protect Paris from the Normans, also known as the Vikings. They wanted to take the city of Paris, and so Philip August decided the construction of a stronghold along the river to protect Parisians from possible invasions. And so the Louvre grew over the years, over the centuries, I should say. One king in the 1360s decided to move to the Louvre. His name is Charles V of France, and he decided to make the Louvre the royal residence. The former royal residence, I don't know if you can see in the back, in the far distance, but there's a big building with towers, turrets that you can see in the back there on the island behind the bridge. That used to be the first palace in Paris, city palace. Charles V lived there, but he was the victim of an attack, so he decided to transfer to the Louvre, and he turned the Louvre into a beautiful fairy tale castle, really, like you saw in the drawing. So the stronghold was turned into a royal castle.
Wow.
The royal castle is gone. It was completely knocked down during the 16th century, during the 1550s, when the Louvre was turned into a Renaissance palace. So I will tell you more about it as I get into the square courtyard.
Okay.
So it will be a little quieter there because there's a lot of traffic right now. It's the evening in Paris, so people are getting out of the office and driving back home with their cars. So it can be a little noisy on the riverbank. If you have any questions, feel free to ask questions during the tour because it's just us, the three of you and myself.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's easy to answer questions and pause at some point, enjoy the site. Oh, I think the tutorial explained that you can zoom in and zoom out as I walk through the streets. You can also
Yes.
take pictures during the tour.
Yeah.
And you can also tap on your pad to raise or draw my attention to certain details.
Okay.
I will see bubbles on my screen,
Okay.
so I know what you're pointing to. Okay, so I'm in the square courtyard. It's a beautiful courtyard here. It's a perfect square. It was completely rebuilt. The part of the square courtyard that you see was rebuilt by Louis XIV, who's the Sun King. I don't know if you're familiar with French history. He's the most famous king in French history, really. He's Louis XIV. He's the Sun King. He's the one that built Versailles. Versailles is a gorgeous castle outside Paris. Have you been to Versailles last time you were in France?
Were you there?
I was not there.
I was not there either.
No.
Yeah. So next time you should definitely go to see Versailles. It's only 45 minutes. It's a train ride, 45 minutes for a taxi to get to Versailles. You'll get to see a gorgeous castle built by Louis XIV because Louis XIV decided to move outside Paris. He didn't like Paris so much, left Paris behind, and settled in Versailles. But he had actually had projects for the Louvre, so the part of the Louvre that you see here was rebuilt in the 1660s. And then older than that, there's the beautiful Renaissance wing, the Lescaut wing we call it, because it was rebuilt by an architect whose name is Pierre Lescaut. And Pierre Lescaut was trained by Italian artists who came to France, because really we now use the term Renaissance, which is a technical term in history, in art history. But back in the day, they wouldn't bother using the term Renaissance. They would say the Italian style, because it's the style that was in fashion in Italy at the time. And Henry II, who's the one king that decided the reconstruction of the Louvre in that new, trendy style, was married to an Italian woman. Her name was Catherine de' Medici. Of course, she was from the Medici family. One of the most famous Italian families in history that ruled the city of Florence. And Catherine was from Florence. She came to France. She married the French King Henry II, and she brought with her her personal taste, Italian taste in fashion and in arts in general. And so basically France was heavily influenced by Italy. Italy was really the hotbed of artistic creation back in the day. And so France followed, and that's exactly what we have here. So what's so Italian about it? The reference to or the influence of ancient Roman architecture. You can see pilasters, columns, statues in niches. You can also see a beautiful decor on top with gods and goddesses of ancient Roman mythology adorning the windows on the top floor. So that's all very Italian. What makes it a little more French, or the French twist in it, is the great sense of harmony, the symmetry. And the French really have something with symmetry, not just for buildings, also for gardens. So really the art of symmetry is part of artistic creation, and architectural creation all throughout history in France. And that's what we see here. We see that the building is set on 3 levels, but we also see that it's divided into 3 different sections all along the gallery. So that's typically French Renaissance, and it's the oldest gallery in the Louvre. It now houses a beautiful collection of ancient Greek antiquities, ancient Greek artifacts and ancient Greek works of art. Because the Louvre is one of the largest museums in the world. It's competing with 2 other museums. Do you know which one? Can you guess? So there's 3 huge museums across the world in different locations. The Louvre is one of them. There's one in the U.S. And it's actually...
The Smithsonian, maybe?
I'm sorry?
Is it the Smithsonian in D.C.?
It could be, but it's actually the Metropolitan Museum in New York
Oh,
City.
New York. Yeah, we've been
Because
there.
I think the Smithsonian is actually located across different, it's a house across different locations or
Yes.
different buildings in
Yeah.
Washington, D.C. Yeah. So one single location would be the Metropolitan Museum.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, even though I know that they have the cloisters, which is the medieval abbey up north, northern Manhattan. But anyway, Metropolitan Museum for the number of works of art. And in terms of prestige, because The third museum used to be a palace, turned into a museum, just like the Louvre was during the French Revolution. It's in Russia, and it's the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia. So the Louvre, yes, used to be a palace, as I said. And what happened? How did it become a museum? It was during the French Revolution that the Louvre became a museum. The revolutionaries decided to make the old palace with the royal collection. Because there was a collection of works of art inside the museum, really, a collection gathered by the French kings. And so the collection was there. Even when Louis XIV moved to Versailles, the majority of the works of art remained here at the Louvre. And when the French Revolution broke out, what happened is that it was not decided right away because it took some time before. The royal family was forced to come back to Paris during the French Revolution. They were held prisoners almost in the Louvre until 1792, and then they were sent to prison. They were tried and sentenced to death. And in 1793, after the king and the queen were sentenced to death, it was decided that the old palace at the Louvre would be a museum open to everyone, the national collection for the French people. And so the Louvre is one of the oldest museums in the world, really. We're in the Napoleon courtyard here. Oh, there's the big wheel behind the pyramid, which is the latest addition to the Louvre, of course. The Napoleon courtyard is a huge courtyard redesigned in the 1850s and in the 1860s by Napoleon III. We'll be talking about Napoleon III today because he's important to the history of Paris. He's the one who transformed Paris in the second half of the 19th century. And the Louvre boasts a collection of 35,000 works of art. I'm sure you know some of them, at least the 3 stars. So I want to show you, of course, the 3 stars in the museum because 80% of the people who come to the Louvre, they come to see those 3 stars first, and then they move on to other sections of the museum that they want to explore. But the first star of the museum, obviously, is the most famous work of art in the whole world. It's the Mona Lisa. Very famous Italian lady, painted by, or she was not famous when Leonardo da Vinci painted her, and she became famous because a portrait was made by someone who became the most famous artist in history, really. And so Leonardo da Vinci came to France. He was pretty old. He was 67 years old. And he actually died here. After spending a couple of years in France, he died in the Loire Valley. Beautiful region. It's a 2-hour drive from Paris. He died in a beautiful chateau, beautiful castle. And he brought paintings with him because he knew he was moving to France. He was a teacher here. He was also working on different projects for the king. And so he brought, can you still hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Can you hear me well?
Yep.
Good, because the connection can actually run pretty scarce here around the pyramid, but I hope it's fine. What did I want to say? Yes, the Leonardo brought 5 paintings with him. And those 5 paintings were bought, they were purchased by the King of France at the time, who was Francis I. They remain here. They were part of the royal collection, and they, of course, became part of the museum in 1793. And out of those 5 paintings, you'd find the Mona Lisa. So 5 paintings by Da Vinci out of 20 paintings by Da Vinci in the whole world that we still have from the Italian Renaissance master. Who else? The second star is no Italian lady. She's a Greek goddess. And she's Venus de Milo. Because the statue is the statue of the goddess of love and beauty. And it was found on the island of Milo in Greece. Hence the name. Venus is the Roman name for Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. So Venus de Milo, very famous statue, is 2,200 years old. It's one of the oldest statues in the museum. It's a Greek original, which makes it very precious because we have very few Greek statues. In the whole world, even if you go to Greece, you won't see so many original statues. Many of them were lost, crushed. The Romans, when the Romans conquered the area around the Mediterranean Sea, obviously they conquered Greece and they copied. The Roman artists copied the Greek artists. So most of the statues that you see inside the Louvre, or most of the marble statues, the ancient statues that you see in museums, most of them are Roman, actually, and not Greek. But Venus de Milo was carved by a Greek artist. There's a great sense of movement. If you look at the body, the way it's standing, I mean, the way she's standing on one foot, one leg, she's a little off kilter. That gives a very natural look to it. And the Greeks were a master at giving a sense of reality to the statues. Third star, I'm just giving you three because these are the three very famous works of art inside the museum. Third star is Victory of Samothrace, another Greek statue carved by a Greek artist, also very precious. It's the statue of the goddess of victory, and her name in Greek, I'm sure you're familiar with her name. Even in ancient Greek, everybody knows her name because it's the name for a very famous sports brand. It's Nike. Nike means victory in ancient Greek. And so the statue is standing at the prow of a ship because the Greeks carved or commissioned the statue to a great sculptor of the time. The statue was just a war monument, basically, to commemorate a great naval battle at sea. Obviously, naval battle, that they won against the Assyrians. And finally, there's only one part of the museum I want to show you because it's really worth going and seeing for your own eyes, with your own eyes. It's the Apollo Gallery. The Apollo Gallery is a beautiful ballroom that was designed for Louis XIV. Again, the king that decided to leave Paris and leave the Louvre behind. It's a prototype for Versailles. Basically, what Charles Lebrun, he was the artist who worked in the Apollo Gallery, what he did in the Apollo Gallery pleased the king so much that the king, Louis XIV, said, what you did here in the Apollo Gallery at the Louvre, I want you to do the same thing, but on a larger scale at Versailles, at the palace in Versailles. And so the Apollo Gallery is famous for the beautiful paintings on the ceiling, the gold on the statues, the beautiful tapestries on the walls. You'd find the crown jewels in window cases. So really worth taking a few minutes, I'd say, or even more, and cross the Apollo Gallery to the Italian Renaissance because it's really next to the Italian Renaissance galleries. I'll have a portrait of Louis XIV, by the way. It's right here. Hold on. That's Louis XIV when he was young, I guess. He was in his late 20s here. He's riding a horse. Oh, do you see the picture in full, or is it just... Oh, yes, now you should see it in full. Louis XIV is riding his horse right here. That's a statue that was brought by Bernini. He was a sculptor to the popes in Rome. He came to France, and that was a present to the king.
Wow. And
so it now stands here in the courtyard at the Louvre. It's a monumental statue. And the pyramid, I should say a few words about the pyramid because the pyramid is the latest addition to the Louvre. It works as the entrance gate into the museum. It's huge. It was built in the 1980s by an Chinese-American architect, I.M. Pei. That's his name. And I.M. Pei worked on that huge project, which was build a glass and metal structure in the courtyard to welcome millions of visitors coming to the Louvre every year. Refurbish or open new rooms and galleries into what we call the Richelieu wing, which used to be the Ministry of Finance. So they opened new rooms for works of art that were in storage. And they also worked on a shopping mall just underneath our feet. While we walk here, there's a shopping mall, there's a parking lot. So it was really a huge project that was inaugurated in 1993 to commemorate the opening of the museum, 200 years before that in 1793. So I will now go through a section of the museum where connection is a little bad, but don't worry. Just want to cross over to my next location. You can think of questions if you have any. I can answer them while I'm walking to the Palais Royal, which will be the second spot on our tour today.
Okay.
Has tourism picked up there at all since COVID, or is it still pretty
It's
slow?
picking up a little bit, yes. People are returning. I had, I had a couple from Oklahoma that came to tour Versailles with me. It was a couple of weeks ago. I also took a couple from New York to the Louvre last week. So yes, people are starting counting back, but it's still very slow. So it's a great time. I mean, we were in Versailles and there was no one, almost no one else. It was not literally empty, but there was not so many people around, so it was just like a dream to tour Versailles and have Versailles in the palace just for ourselves.
So we'll have to come
It's
soon.
the perfect time, yes. Yeah, it's a perfect time. And also because you see the city is also very quiet because most Parisians they take their holiday vacation. I'd say the quietest is from mid-July to mid-August.
Okay.
So basically from the 14th of July, our national holiday, Bastille Day, to the 15th of August, which is also a holiday in France, the city is very quiet.
Okay.
And then it starts picking up again with business activity in end of August.
Okay.
Especially the last week of August. So yes, it's a great time to come to the city. August is a great month to come to the city. If you don't mind hot temperatures, which is not so normal for Paris because really Paris never had very hot summers. The kind of summers that you have in the southern US, we don't have that here. But yeah, I mean, in the past few years, we've had hot summers.
Okay.
Temperatures in the 90s, even in the 100s, which is very unusual for Paris. Yeah. And we don't have air conditioning here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem with Paris. Southern France do have, because they're used to high temperatures in the summer. So, for example, if you go to Cannes and Nice and the French Riviera, there most hotels, even people will have air conditioning at home. But that's not the case for Paris because we never had very hot summers.
Right.
We do have the heaters, the heating system. Definitely, we need that because winters can be they can be pretty cold. Don't get so much snow, but wet, a lot of rain. So yeah, so I wanted to take you to the Palais Royal. It's a beautiful palace, smaller than the Louvre. It was built for a prime minister in the 17th century. His name is Richelieu. He was cardinal of the Catholic Church, so he was the man in red, wearing a red robe and a red hat. And so he was a prime minister to King Louis XIII. He was a big fan of theater, live theater. So this is one of the oldest theaters in Paris. It says Comédie Française, or the French comedy in English. So there's a beautiful stage inside with classical plays from the great French playwrights of the past, like Molière. Got pictures to show you. That's the theater in the 18th century, crowded with people. I've got the theater today empty, but with the beautiful crimson red velvet and gold decor. And so, yeah, so Richelieu had this beautiful palace built just across from the Louvre. So it was pretty handy for him to just cross the street and visit the king in his royal apartment at the Louvre. And what I want to do is that I want to take you inside the Palais Royal because it's really worth taking a stroll, especially on a warm, sunny afternoon in Paris. Not so many people see that you can actually go through this arch passageway. I'll be in the main courtyard, just outside the main palace. It used to be the property of King Louis XIV's brother, because when Louis XIV decided to move to Versailles, he left behind, the question could be, but he said to us, he told us that it was the property of Richelieu. Richelieu died, and Richelieu said in his will, he mentioned the fact that he was donating his palace to the crown, to the king. And so basically, Louis XIII died when Louis XIV, his son, was young. He was 5 years old. And so Louis XIV inherited the Louvre and the Palais Royal.
Wow.
It's a gorgeous palace. And as he grew up, I told you he didn't like Paris so much. Well, poor boy, he was the victim of an attack here in Palais Royal. He was just 10 years old with his mother, the prime minister of the time was Cardinal Mazarin, his brother, Philippe of Orleans, and they were the victim of an attack. An angry mob broke into the palace and threatened them. And so they had to leave Paris in the middle of the night. And so it was just bad memory for him. And he decided that moving to Versailles, of course, the Louvre would remain the royal palace in Paris, but Palais Royal the former property of Cardinal Richelieu. He saw it as a great present to his brother, Philippe of Orleans, and I will show you Philippe of Orleans. He became the owner of the place here. Philippe of Orleans loved staying in Paris. He didn't like Versailles so much. He thought that it was much more fun to be in the heart of Paris, and so he threw lavish parties here. And a lot of people flocked to the Palais Royal, which was a great place for shopping, for being entertained, really, with those beautiful parties. And the Orleans family remained the owner. The family remained the owner of the palace until well into the 19th century. It was during the Second Empire that the palace was confiscated and became the property of the French government. And it's now the seat of the Constitutional Council. The Constitutional Council works just like the Supreme Court in the United States. So basically, it's our Supreme Court housed in the palace here. And it was also, yes, a great place for shopping, and I will show you where people would go shopping. They would also go to the garden, just like some Parisians do. It's one of my favorite places and one of my favorite gardens in Paris, really, because I mean, it's the perfect weather to be here, grab a book, bring some drinks, even some food. You'd find people who picnic in the garden here or read a book by the fountain. It's a beautiful French garden. So again, I told you that French architecture and French gardens are all about symmetry, great harmony. Trees are trimmed, alleys of trees, the statues and the rose garden. So beautiful garden, really, to enjoy some time here in the city. And so the garden was there at the time of the Orleans family. Just before the French Revolution, the head of the Orleans family, who was another Philip, a descendant of the first Philip in the family, decided to build apartment buildings all around the garden. So basically, today we'd call it a real estate development, because it was kind of broke, and he needed to find some way to replenish his finances. And so he decided, or his advisors told him to build those apartment buildings and subdivide them into beautiful apartments. And so these are residential buildings until now. I mean, these are still residential buildings. Well, very expensive place to live in Paris. One of the most expensive places to live in Paris.
I bet, yeah.
And in fact, under the arches, in the galleries, you find shops.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So the kind of independent stores that you wouldn't find around the Opera House where I'm taking you at the end of the tour. So people here come more for independent designers, interior designers, fashion designers, but again, the independent kind, not the big chains, the likes of Zara and H&M. So pretty interesting shops to check if you're in the area. And I definitely, if you visit the Louvre, come to the Palais Royal right after touring the Louvre, is a great place to experience Parisian lifestyle. Because this is very Parisian here. There's a great perfume shop. If you want to try French perfumes, the name for it is Serge Lutens. It has the beautiful original decor of the 18th century, repainted in bright colors. It has beautiful windows, I will show you, but it's a very famous perfume shop here in the galleries at the Palais Royal.
What do those apartments go for? Do you know? Like, if you were to live there, are they in the millions of dollars?
Most likely, yes. I'd say we calculate prices in square meters. So 1 square meter at the Palais Royal would probably go for $20,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And 1 square meter is what? Is it 10 square feet? Hold on. No, 100 square feet?
Yeah.
I can't remember now.
I think so.
It's close, yeah. Wow.
Basically, a large apartment would be, a family apartment would be 150 square meters. And that would sell, I wouldn't be surprised that an apartment like that would sell for 3 or 4 million euros.
Wow.
But now that we're in the COVID pandemic, prices tend to be more stable. They skyrocketed in the past few years. They have skyrocketed in the past few years, but now they become the the increase really stopped in terms of prices. Is it going to go down, to drop? I doubt it because it's Paris, but who knows?
Oh, that's very pretty.
A lot of families want to move to the outskirts of Paris where they can buy houses and have more space, obviously, because apartments are pretty small, especially compared to your standards in the US.
Right.
The fountain, yes, I told you.
Pretty.
It is very pretty, of course, and you can see the apartments overlooking the garden. Great place to enjoy a sunny afternoon or a sunny evening here in the city. Yeah. So I'm gonna walk under the trees, under the shade, in the shade of the trees, and I want to take you to the upper end of the Palais Royal. I want to show you one of the best restaurants in the city. It used to be a cafe. So of course this place here is really connected to the period in history here in France when France was a monarchy. So it's really connected to the royals because this was the property of the Orleans family, probably one of the most prestigious aristocratic families in what we call the old regime in France. It's all changed now. I mean, the monarchy was abolished during the French Revolution. France is now a republic, so it's completely different. But back in the day, you had those wealthy families that owned mansions in the city, huge estates in the countryside. They had a staff, a huge staff working for them. And of course, they had a staff in the kitchen, and they had chefs who cooked for them. And after the French Revolution, many chefs were left with no jobs. So they thought, what are we going to do with our hands? And they thought, there's so many cafes in Paris, maybe we can turn some of them into restaurants. That's what they did. And the menu, the word menu, you know for sure, was invented by those chefs because basically the menu was the set menu they created for those families. A menu was made for every day of the week. And so they did the same thing, opening those restaurants in former cafes. They offered menus to patrons. And this restaurant is a top-notch restaurant in Paris, the Grand Véfour. It's beautiful. It has the decor of the 18th century. There's a Michelin star chef who works in the kitchen now. Something new that I see that they have a sitting area outside. It's kind of tucked in between the columns, under the galleries. So it's really a whole experience of Parisian. Also parts of the Parisian lifestyle, high gastronomy, high cuisine.
What's the
Pretty
name
expensive.
of it?
Mm-hmm.
What was the name of that restaurant?
Véfour, V-E-F-O-U-R, the Grand Véfour. Yeah. I was invited there once. Delicious food. Many courses, you see, but then you get to the dessert and there's no room for dessert because you had so many courses that you're completely full. But yeah, definitely one of the best restaurants in Paris. Especially with the decor, it's so old that when the waiter takes you to your table, the waiter tells you what famous character in history sat at the table you're sitting at.
That's so cool.
So, for example, Napoleon went for lunch there. Who else? Victor Hugo, who wrote Les Miserables in Notre Dame, went for dinner there.
Wow.
So many famous people. The revolutionaries also went there. And so I'm just outside Palais Royal, and I need to go through that area to take you to the last stop on our tour, third stop on our tour, which is the Opera House, the gorgeous Opera House. And I need to walk through that street, Rue des Petits Champs. So it means the small fields street or little fields street, with old buildings. Now I want to show you the difference between old Paris with the Louvre, the Palais Royal, this street here, and modern Paris, recreated, transformed in the 19th century by Napoleon III and Haussmann. I'll be talking about someone very important to the history of Paris. His name was George Eugene Haussmann. By the way, you will notice Japanese stores, Japanese restaurants here, because it's our little Tokyo here in Paris. Many Japanese people settled in the neighborhood, and the open Japanese places. So if you miss your sushi or your ramens, that's the place to come to. They're actually good. It's good food. So just walking through the streets with old buildings, some of them dating back to the 18th century, really. It's a beautiful street. I mean, you find wealthy people even back then. But you need to think that most of Paris in the 19th century, before the great transformation of Haussmann, was an old city, a medieval city with half-timbered houses. Do you know what half-timbered houses look like?
No.
I think in the U.S. you call them Bavarian houses, the one with the timber, the logs.
Oh, okay.
On the facade, on the outside.
Yep.
Yeah, so there were many houses, like old houses. Some of them were crumbling down. The city was in a very bad state of disrepair. And the city was actually dirty and dangerous in the 1850s, at the end of the 1840s. And so the character that I want to introduce you to here is, yes, Napoleon III. He was a nephew to Napoleon I. I'm sure you're familiar with Napoleon I because Napoleon I is the conqueror, the warrior, the one that proclaimed himself emperor in 1804. 50 years after him, his nephew rose to power in France. And in between, he lived in exile because the Bonaparte family was not welcome anymore. After Napoleon I was defeated and exiled by the English in 1815, the Bonaparte family had to live in exile. And so Napoleon III was young. He spent most of his youth in different countries across Europe. He traveled to the US in the 1840s, spent a couple of years in London, and he actually loved London, which is pretty odd for a Frenchman of the time, because Britain has always been the enemy in history in Europe. And so Napoleon III was really impressed by London, that became a modern city during the Industrial Revolution and the reign of Queen Victoria. So London really becoming the main city, the modern city in the world. And Napoleon III had a vision for Paris. What he saw in London could be applied to Paris, and maybe even better. New standards, new rules for urban design. And so he was elected president in 1851. And what he did not long after that, a few months after that, he made a coup. And he proclaimed himself emperor, just like his uncle did 40 years before, or 50 years before him. He toured France. He wanted to meet with the French people in the country. He passed through different cities, met with the dignitaries, the high officials of different cities in France. He was in Bordeaux. I'm sure you heard about Bordeaux because Bordeaux is a very famous city, famous for the wine in France. Bordeaux is a beautiful city, by the way, if you get a chance to tour southwestern France, which is a great area in France. Bordeaux is worth taking the trip. And anyway, when he passed through Bordeaux, he was welcomed by the mayor of Bordeaux, who was Haussmann. I'll show you a picture of Haussmann. And so, Haussmann made a great impression on the emperor. He was a very charismatic man. He was very efficient in everything that he really involved in, different projects for Bordeaux. As Napoleon III returned to Paris, he thought, we need to start the works in Paris, and I need someone to be head of project. And he thought, what's the name of that high official, that man that we met in Bordeaux? His advisors reminded him, that's Haussmann, George Eugene Haussmann, Majesty. Call him to Paris. I need him. And he made Haussmann mayor of Paris. And Haussmann became the transformer of Paris, really. That's what he did, because half of Paris that you see now is, I was about to say because of Haussmann, but most people will say thanks to Haussmann. He left his mark on the city, really. He knocked down entire areas in central Paris. He rebuilt the city with beautiful apartment buildings, with a set of rules, set of standards, in terms of height and width, in terms of the number of floors and the decor on the facade, the balconies, the way they are laid out inside, the large apartments on the 3rd and 4th floors, smaller apartments in the upper floors, because you'd find different social classes inside one same building. The upper you get into the Haussmannian building, the lower you get in society. Or at the time, it's all changed now. But you would find the wealthy families, the bourgeoisie, as we call them in French, even now. Bourgeois families living in those huge apartments with the balconies that you see. And then they added the balconies on top because then the bourgeois class moved upwards with the introduction of the elevator. And they all work the same way. Shops on the ground floor, workshop storage on the floor just above the shops. It's a smaller floor. Then the noble floors, 3rd and 4th, and then smaller apartments for employees and clerks in the upper floors. And finally, all the way to the top under the roofs, the maid rooms. For the maids who worked for those wealthy families, they just had to walk down a few floors, and they were ready to serve those very wealthy Parisian families of the 19th century, of the second half of the 19th century. And so this was a big part of Parisian life in the 19th century, the boulevard, and those great institutions like the Opera House that I will show you now. The big Opera House that was built, that was started in 1861. There's something I wanted to add about that. Oh, yes, you see, I'm using the term Haussmannian. It became a word in French. You will hear Parisians say, do you live in a Haussmannian building? Oh, you live in a Haussmannian apartment, that's right. So really the word, the term, the name of the man became a word in the French language. Sorry, the avenue is kind of ugly because the mayor decided to open lanes for bicycles and electric scooters, and it's temporary, so you see those ugly yellow poles all along the avenue of the Opera. Parisians are complaining about them. They said, the city hall said that it's gonna, obviously it's gonna be changed, made permanent with more beautiful signage and urban furniture. That's the term that they would use with Haussmann, transform Paris and creating new urban furniture. The Opera House, one of the most beautiful opera houses in the world, one of the largest. It was started in 1861. That was a decision made by the emperor and the empress, the emperor. But the empress had a word to say on it because she favored the young architect who she thought had the best project. His name was Garnier. So when you're in Paris, you will most likely hear Parisians say, oh, you should go see the Opera Garnier, which is the old opera house, because we have two. There's another modern opera house, is the Bastille Opera House. It's not so interesting. I mean, it's great if you want to see or listen to beautiful sung operas, lyrical operas at the Bastille. The sound is great. The acoustic is great. But for the decor, you need to go see the former opera house. There's Apollo, God Apollo on top, holding up a lyre. Symbol of music, because it's the god of arts and the god of music in ancient Greek mythology. We'll be able to cross here. That's the problem with the Opera House Square, is that it's super heavy with traffic. That's another project with the City Hall. They're turning those huge squares in Paris into more pedestrian-friendly zones. There's a long way to go still for the Opera House.
Yeah. So I will get closer. I want to show you the facade. So again, the construction lasted over the span of 15 years. Napoleon III never stepped into the Opera House because he died in 1873, and the Opera House was inaugurated in 1875. Took 15 years. So you would go to the old opera house, which was knocked down not long after this opera house was inaugurated. And it was big entertainment in Paris in the 19th century. At a time when there was no television, there was no movie theater. So people would go up. People would go to the opera house. What kind of people? The elites, really, the upper class, would go to the opera house wearing dinner jackets, tuxedos, women wearing beautiful gowns, and they would spend the whole evening at the opera house. Different from today where people really go see a performance. They sit for 3 hours maybe, but they listen religiously to the performance. Back in the day, they would sit and watch first the show or the performance, but then they would move to I will show you the inside. I will show you the grand staircase.
Oh wow, it's pretty.
That's the staircase, it's inside. You can tour the opera house if you're interested. I really advise people to go see the opera for themselves. You don't necessarily need to go for a show at night. You can tour in the afternoon. I think the tour is 1 hour. It's every day at 2 and 3 p.m. depending on the language. You can check online. And so that's the grand staircase taking people to the main room. That's the grand foyer. That's where people would actually take some time off for drinks and food and chat with each other, with one another. That's the chandelier just above the chandelier, just above the main room, the stage room, all crimson, red velvet, and gold again. So really something outstanding, lavish, something spectacular inside. The decor, Garnier oversaw every detail in the opera house. He really wanted to leave his mark on every part of the opera house. The opera house is also famous for maybe the musical The Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
Because of course it's The Phantom of the Opera. The story originates in the opera house in Paris, with the legend of a water lake under the building and a phantom, a ghost haunting the place at night, and even during performances. When you tour the opera house, you get to see there's a plaque showing you where the ghost would sit during the performance inside the building. So really a great place and emblematic of Paris in the 19th century, and even now. I mean, now it's actually difficult. People are booking tickets months in advance because they really want to go see an opera in the old opera house. So sometimes you check for a ticket 6 months in advance and it's fully booked for very famous operas by Mozart and other great music composers. It can be pretty difficult to get tickets, and they can be also very expensive. Sometimes you get good deals. There's a ticket booth inside the opera house, so people go and check for last-minute tickets. Also, I will show you because the entrance is really gorgeous. It was specifically designed for the emperor and the empress, who had been, I will get rid of the picture, who had been the emperor and the empress, or the emperor, more precisely, had been a victim of an attack in the former opera house. And so he asked Garnier, and you can see a bust statue of Charles Garnier, and the opera house plan, the architectural plan of the opera house, which is huge.
Wow.
In this area that was completely rebuilt by Haussmann. It's a showcase for Haussmannian architecture, Parisian architecture. And anyway, this entrance gate is huge. There's a ramp, and a carriage can drive up the ramp to take the imperial family inside the building, for them to step out of the carriage into the building, and not outside, just for safety reasons, safety matters. And I wanted to add something. Yes, there's a ticket booth inside. That's where you go. That's the entrance you go through when you want to tour the opera house in the afternoon, or if you want to buy tickets for a show in the evening, if you want to get last-minute tickets. And it's really worth going. It's one of the most majestic buildings in Paris, really. And just behind, if you're into shopping, that's where I will end the tour, and I will give you maybe a couple of minutes to ask questions if you have. There's a whole shopping area behind the opera house. It's the big department stores. which was also part of Parisian life in the 19th century, because it is here in Paris that big department stores started. Galeries Lafayette, Printemps, Bon Marché, all those names that you still find in Paris, in different locations across Paris. They started in the second half of the 19th century. They were very modern back in the day, because what was so modern about it is that people could browse through departments, and they could browse freely without being asked what they wanted. And prices were also set and displayed on the. I mean, they were fixed prices, and you could see the prices of the items as you browsed through the department store, which was something modern because back then, before the department store, people would go to workshops, they would go to smaller stores, they needed to take appointments with the sales assistant that worked in collaboration with craftsmen. So basically, you needed to order something that was not there, you couldn't see, but you ordered it, and then you needed to set a price for it. And so the department store was something completely different. Promotional sales, as we know now, they started in those department stores in Paris. It really started once a year. They would get rid of the fabric rolls because the colors faded. That's how it started. I will tell you the story. The sales started that way. The department stores sold fabric, the big fabric rolls, and those rolls, yes, the colors faded after a few months or after a year. And so they thought, what are we going to do? Because people won't buy them. Oh, we should give promotion sales. And every year, the first year they said, we're going to do promotion sales on those fabric rolls. And then the idea was set in stone, and it continued over the years. Every year, they would have those sales in those department stores, the likes of Galeries Lafayette and Printemps. So really where it's going. Also because Galeries Lafayette has a beautiful decor inside, the 1900s decor. We call it Art Nouveau. You can also go on top to see people. They're standing by the glass panel. They're having a great view on Paris in the whole area here of the Opera House. I'm going to be noticing just a second, sorry. That's police. I'm walking around the Opera House. So lots of stores here, not just the department stores, but you will find the big chains, the Uniqlo, Zara, H&M, all the big names in high street fashions or big chains fashion. It's also a great deal. A lot of Parisians go to the Opera House area for shopping, obviously. And this is where I will stop. It's quiet here, so I can take some of your questions, even if you have. So remember, we started the tour at the Louvre, the largest museum in the city and one of the largest in the world. We crossed over to the Palais Royal residence of Richelieu that became a favorite spot for Parisians to enjoy, a beautiful garden tucked away from the rest of the city. And finally, we made it to the Opera House, which was big entertainment, a large part of the entertainment industry, even though it was not an industry back then, but it was, of course, a great place to spend long evenings in Paris in the 19th century. And let me turn the camera back onto myself, and I can take some questions if you have any. Feel free. Even practical information if you need to plan a next trip to Paris.
That's definitely on my list to do, so we'll have to look you up when we get there.
Sure, of course, please do. I'll be happy to take you wherever you feel like going. There are so many places you want to see in Paris. Of course, the Eiffel Tower, the Marais area, beautiful area, beautiful neighborhood with lots of mansions, beautiful architecture, Ile de la Cité, Montmartre, which feels like a village and very different from what we saw today. So a lot of different areas to explore in Paris. Yeah.
Question? No, I don't think.
No.
No questions?
No, I don't think so.
You're good?
But yeah, thank you so much. That was great to get a look around.
Yes. That's basically, so I know it's different from the live experience. I mean, being in person in Paris, it's a little different, but you get to see a bit of Parisian life right now.
Yeah.
In a time that was a little difficult, but it's getting better. You see, I'm wearing this mask. If you were wondering how things are going with COVID right here, I don't need to wear a mask outside, but I just wear it down, just under my mouth, just in case I need to step into a store or into a building. I need to put my mask on, but you don't need to wear a mask. If you're fully vaccinated, you're allowed into the country. Then you can sit at a table at a restaurant or a cafe, and you won't have to wear your mask. Obviously, drinking and eating. Of course. So restrictions are steadily lifted.
Good, good.
I think we're going the right direction. Hopefully by the fall season, things will be a little more normal. We'll see, but we hope for the best.
All right.
Awesome.
All right, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
And I hope to see you soon in Paris.
Sounds
All
good.
right. Thank you. Bye.